let's get the show on the road.
Yeah, welcome, Simon.
Well, thank you. It's lovely to be here. I've never been called a thought leader before, so that's a new fancy title to add to the resume, I guess. You should see my screen now, right? I tried to do a presentation mode here.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, today's talk is about, I was thinking I would go through things from a manager's perspective when it comes to game development, and manage as a sort of studio lead leadership role within a development studio, because that's what I do. Like I said, I'm one of the founders of Mirage Game Studios, and I thought I'd walk you through our first title and how it went and what we did throughout the whole project and how the relationship with our publisher worked. And as I do that, I thought I'd go through and talk about some of the specific things that happen and why they happen, and relate to them how this works within the industry and what the roles are and what you can do about them and so on. So just briefly, I have to just click here and see if it works now. There we are. Yeah. So just my background quickly. I have always been into game design and developing stuff for 3D or, the visual medium as a thing. Right out of high school, I started freelancing as a designer. I made concept art for video game companies, and I made freelance and did key art and marketing stuff in general. And then later on got into more visualizing technical stuff and ran my own company as a sort of 3D artist mainly. And we did interactive presentations of buildings and engineering and that sort of thing. But video gaming has always been my passion, and I still game quite a lot, and it's my main drive and interest really. So the way this project started was I had an idea for a game I wanted to do, and I wasn't actually in the industry at the time. I was working with my own company that was more into visual art and that sort of thing. And me and a friend thought, why don't we just make our own studio? Why don't we just start off our own thing? We had this idea, or I came with an idea, which was about factories and how you could do something cool with the sort of production industry. And it was quite straightforward. The idea was you would have a top-down view of a factory. You would be this manager, and you would run a factory basically. And we would try to turn that into something that's more charming and fun, and less about numbers and the stiff logistics and the technical bits, and more about the fun challenges when it comes to layouts and how you develop products and that sort of thing. And that was the basic idea. And as we looked at it in the beginning, we thought, okay, so we have a few options here. We could try to fund it ourselves, but sadly none of us were rich or knew someone rich, so we couldn't actually get money from nowhere or just fund it ourselves. That was the difficult option. We could try to find an investor. An investor in this case would be someone purely used as a business arrangement with money. Just give us this much cash, you get this much cash back. You're not really involved in the process. So take a loan from a bank, or one option we went for and actually tried for a bit was we could find people within the factory industry, so to speak, who could help us fund this thing, and they would get something out of it, but it would be mainly a business arrangement. They would help us make a game and we'd share the profits. That was sort of the idea, but we'd still do everything ourselves. The third one we looked at was try to crowdfund it, the usual Kickstarter route, to try to pitch this to a wide audience and see if people were willing to pre-order it essentially, or buy like a really early copy of it and see if we could fund it that way. And the final option we had was to try to find a publisher, a game publisher, and see if we could make a partnership out of it and find someone who could do the things we didn't know how to do and also fund the project. And we really went for the final one, even though we tried and looked at things. We thought, early access is also interesting, and there are things we like there, and you could fund it partially and then hope you get the rest of it when you release a half-finished product and that sort of thing. But we went for the final route, and we sent it to 2 publishers really. But I'll get into the exact things that went on there. But before I get into that, I think, what does a publisher actually do? Because this can be quite different depending on the industry and who you talk to. So if you look at the wiki definition, it just says publishing is the activity of making information, literature, music, software, and other content available to the public. So just strictly the publishing bit is about taking something and really marketing and getting it on the market in some way. Help people sell it or help people get it out there. In game development, it's usually more wide than that. They are usually more involved in what the game actually is, where it comes from, and even finance or do it from scratch themselves. Even though that's not only publishing, that's what publishers usually do. They are a bigger organization in the games industry. And even the publisher we ended up with have different deals and different setups depending on who they work with and depending on which product it is. So our publisher, for instance, has products where they strictly just publish things. Someone has a game they want to get on the European market, they can get it out there, and they do nothing else. All the way down to they have an idea for a game, they get someone to do the game for them, and then they publish it, and everything in between. So publishing within the games industry can be quite different, really depending on who you're working with and what relationship is and all sorts of things. But yeah, we thought we know nothing about marketing. Beyond sort of a user experience, we think we know what works, but really we have no context. We have no idea how to do this. And the main focus for us is we want to make a cool game. It was just being one guy, really. We quickly put two more guys on the team, but it was just two of us in the beginning. And we thought we need a prototype. We need something to show what it is, because concepts and paper pitches get you some distance, and if you're really good, you can get all the way. But we really need something tangible we can show off, and we need something that proves we at least have a clue what we're doing. So it's not just all ideas, because that's one of the things we hate ourselves when we see pitches is some with lots of ideas and no idea how to make it, or we can't even judge if they can make it. So we need a prototype. So we made this thing. So this is actually the very first version of Little Big Workshop, or Mini Factory as it was called back then. This is based on two weekends of work and about a month's mailing back and forth, and it's super rough. I think the expression Victor, one of the founders, used was this thing is held together by duct tape, blood, sweat, and tears, and big dreams. It's really janky if you look beneath it. Even all the animations were done by me personally, even though I don't animate. But we needed something. We needed to show off what it worked like. And for the nerds in the audience, you can see these are the default buttons in Unity. We didn't do anything, and that animation has all sorts of work assets associated with it. But yeah, it was a basic prototype just showing this is kind of mechanics we've done. The idea is this, and we could point to this and show what it's about and how we had started making this something basic. I love the stabbing motion that carve a wood figure. But yeah, it was something. So we took that and we sent it off to one publisher who was a really big one. I'm not going to name them here because we didn't end up with them. And then I thought to myself, well, we do have a really big publisher or a big company locally, which was THQ Nordic AB, or Embracing Group as they call now. And I thought, why not? I'll just send them a mail. So really, I sent them a mail saying, and this is in Swedish, so sorry for those who can't read it, but it basically says, hey, we met a while back, and we used to be neighbors. I have this game I'd like to make, and it's called this, and just a one or two sentence pitch about what it is, and really just a link to pictures of it. Get in touch if you think it's cool. And 2 weeks later, we had a company, more or less, and that was weird, but that's really how fast it went, and we sort of questioned what actually happened here, how did this get fast tracked so hard in our case, and what actually worked here. And I have spoken to the publisher after the whole project, and we have retrospectives together and so on. And the way they put it and the way we are gathered is the prototype helped. The prototype was good, but it wasn't really the main deciding factor. The main things were it was a good concept, so there's a market for it. They can actually sell something. It was a good presentation. We gave off personally. I gave off a good impression. I like this is something we wanted to do. I was told later on Simon can be a passionate guy, which I think is a backhanded compliment, but it's it's their way of saying you seem to know your thing even though you're very opinionated. sort of. so that was a big part of it, and which might have killed my self-esteem a little bit hearing it afterwards. They just really wanted the studio in Karlstad. They had no local anchoring of a company in Karlstad, Värmland, even though the main HQ was here. So that was just a chance, really, for us, or a timing thing. And about that, I don't think that was the deciding factor if the game was good enough, but it did get things fast-tracked quite a bit. Normally, you would go through many, many more stages of review and due diligence and that sort of thing. But we got fast-tracked through the right people right away, and they said, yeah, it looks okay, so hit it. So what they ended up deciding or going for in our case was we would become an internal studio. So we wouldn't be a completely standalone entity. We would be a part of the publishing company, and we would be essentially 100% owned by them, and we would only be employed. And we would get a royalty deal for, you get this amount of share for the game when it gets out, and you still have these incentives, and to a very high degree, we got to do what we wanted internally. As long as we could deliver the things we spoke about, and as long as we agreed with the contacts we had with the publishing department, we were sort of indie. We just did our own thing. And you'll see how that worked and didn't work, which is fun. But initial plan was quite straightforward. We would get our first playable version out by early 2017. So the mail was sent in summer 2016. So just half a year from that, we would have a first playable version up. Then we get a vertical slice, we would get an alpha, a beta, and a go master. So the whole thing would take about 1.5 years to do, was the first estimation. And this turned out to be wildly off. It would take much longer than that due to all various reasons. But the initial plan was this, at least. We would do it in 1.5 years. But yes, a word on THQ Nordic, because I think it's worth mentioning what they do and what they at least were famous for back then and what they are now. THQ Nordic was mainly a publisher known for making remakes and what I call fixer-upper projects. They would take a known IP or a known game, and they would make sequels for it, or expansions for it, or HD remakes. Even though they also made they also made their own IPs or completely fresh games from which weren't known before. But that's what they were mainly known for, and almost all the teams were also much larger than we were. They had small porting teams back then with just a few people, but we were for sure a micro company compared to all the others in the whole company structure. So that was a bit special, and you could tell quite early on they weren't really used to working with small companies like this, and they really expected way more than was reasonable for us to deliver. But it was a ongoing dialogue and a fun experience nevertheless. But so yeah, the old days were straightforward. We got a producer on their end, whose job was really to just keep us in check, so to speak. So we would have quite frequently in the beginning, we would bi-weekly send him a mail and just say, this is how we're doing. This is what's going on right now. This is what the status is. These are the issues we have. So a mail every other Friday, just saying this is what we're doing. And then we'd have bigger milestone deliveries like every other month, or every month even in the beginning, where we would have a proper sit down and show the whole game and present what we're doing and a demo sort of. But quickly we realized this producer we had was sort of one of the top guys in the whole company, and he was just far too busy to work with us. And we fairly early on got a new producer. By their decision, they decided, no, this guy really don't have time to manage this product, so we put in a new guy on it. So the previous guy was quite experienced as a producer. He was not a developer, at least not a really experienced developer. He hadn't done a lot of games himself. He works from an airplane because he's super busy, so I think he had several offices, and he was hard to get hold of. Always busy hard to get hold of. He was in charge of the project though, so whenever we said something to him, we always knew the feedback we got back was the accurate one, and this was a decision we can make directly. And personally, he was just a super nerd. He loved talking about games and tech. And why do I mention these things? And mainly it's because all these relations, when you have even when it's strict business, gets personal, and you have to adapt to who you're working with, and the business relation changes depending who the other person is. So the new guy we got was not as experienced as a producer. This was kind of new for him, but he was more well-versed in details of development, so that bit was easier to talk about. He had a fixed office in Barcelona, so he was in Spain. So all discussions were by distance in both cases. This guy was actually easy to get a hold of, but he was sort of a middle manager. You'll see what this meant later on. And yeah, as a person, he loves to talk about food and wine because, he's from Spain, and that's their thing, I guess. But how does this actually factor into anything? This is, and it's kind of interesting. I think this is something new students or people who aren't working with business relations don't see as easily. And it's, even though these guys had very much the same role from my point of view, they both had the same things I asked them. I needed them for the same reasons. We may have an issue I have to get help with. We need to do testing. I have to reach out to them. They both had the same role from my point of view, but I had to treat them quite differently to actually get the stuff I needed or wanted. If I needed to get a testing done or we needed to discuss something, it was impossible to reach one of the guys in general. I could send mails to him, and once in a while I got a reply back. And if I ever sent a mail, I had to make sure I never include more than one question, because it was always the first one question and not the second one. So send multiple mails, make it short, make it easy. Whereas the other guy wasn't as good when it came to texts in general. So whenever I want to get something done, I just call them up and say, do you have 5 minutes? Can we talk about this thing? We need to do these things, and I have an issue with this thing. So a lot more, it affects everything you do on a day-to-day basis when it comes to management, and how you treat these people and how the relation works. So yeah, a new guy was kind of a special relation there, and yeah, the middle management, I'll come to that because that affected a lot of things. But yeah, we started producing this thing. It went on for almost a year, and we were actually nearing some kind of close to beta stage, and then sort of out of the blue, one of the managers of the company, so not a producer, he's 1 or 2 levels above him, just out of the blue asked me, what do you think about early access? And for those not that much into the industry, early access is a sort of trend or an idea where you release a game that's not quite finished, but you bring in a lot of users and you can buy it early, so you can get a lot of feedback in and you can develop the game with the community. That's the gist of it, even though there are a lot of different ways of doing this. And I just thought, what do you think about early access? And this was not the plan at the moment at all, and we were quite late in the project. So why are we asking? I think the reason was mainly because they had other projects that just recently successfully did this, and like I said, this kind of game that we were making wouldn't actually fit into this. So we had discussed this really early on, but decided no, we're gonna release a game that's finished, and then it's gonna be done. We're not gonna do this really long code develop thing with the community. It's better to just make a one shot. It's our first project. Let's not do the eternal early access race since we have a publisher. But still, we decided to look into it and discuss what would it mean to actually move from a finished product to an early access thing. And we came up with different things that would need to be done and how the game and the product in general might change or might have to change. And it goes into all sorts of things. It goes into what kind of audience, how they relate, but mainly was the game would need to change. So originally we had planned for this factory game to be based on levels, for instance. So you would found a factory, you would build it from scratch, you would take it to a certain level, and then you would move on to a new factory. And when you do that from scratch, you would repeat the whole loop, so to speak. So you would make several factories after each other, and each one would be more advanced, and each one would be new, and you would repeat the whole cycle several times. That doesn't really work for early access, at least in my opinion, because you can't release a level at a time, and this sort of sandboxy game style isn't really fit for that way of doing it. I have seen early access titles do levels and stuff, but it's always a bit weird. So when you buy an early access title, you expect certain things, and some things work and some things don't. So that was the main thing. We would have to redesign a lot of the game to work for sort of an open market rather than step-by-step levels. Open market in the game, that is. But yeah, some back and forth and some discussion, and it suddenly turned into, right, so we're doing early access. And this meant we scrapped the previous release date, we set up new dates, and we got a project extension. So more or less 6 months, I think, 6 months to a year was added projects, and the scope raised from what we were planning to do. So we went from 4 people to, we ended up with 7, even though we'll add a few and see how many we need before we can get this thing done. And that would be a challenge in many ways. Yeah, not just get the thing done, but also as a team. We went from being just 4 guys in a room to having a team with all the things it entails and comes from that. So we just kept chugging on. And as we were doing this, the relationship with the publisher started to be a bit more challenging. And this was mainly during the summer and autumn in 2018 when we were, from our point of view, as intense as it could be. And the struggles we had mainly seems to come from, and this from discussion with them afterwards, growing pains on their end, where a lot of stuff just wasn't working. They had gone from quite a small company to doubling or even tripling in size. And this meant a lot of issues for us because it was hard to get a hold of people. Things we booked weren't happening in the order they should be. And yeah, it was just bad timing in general for things. Like, for those who aren't aware what Gamescom is, for instance, Gamescom is one of the biggest trade shows in the world, really. And this is a huge thing for our publisher. And we had some of our most intense testing periods were booked around Gamescom. And you can imagine how easy it was to get hold of people in the middle of that if the testing wasn't being done or if we had any issues with that sort of thing. So we had a lot of issues with communications, really. It wasn't all the people we talked with were great. Individually, they were really knowledgeable and cool. But it's just as an organization, they grew really, really quick, and that meant a lot of issues for us. And on our end, we had lots of issues too. Things took a lot more time than we expected. It was a challenge to redesign this game to the new idea and the standard we were going for, and we really had to rethink what we were going to do since the beginning. And it was a challenge, really. So here is my top 3 incidents and examples of weird things that may happen when this kind of relationship doesn't work, as it wasn't back then. So, for instance, we got some random art direction one day. And I had sort of guessed this was coming because they had asked me quite a lot about the art, and we said, yeah, it's coming in summer. We're going to do it in summer, and this is not a priority for us. We're doing the technical stuff right now, so art is coming later. Be cool. It'll come. And we basically had a meeting or a feedback meeting from the publisher where they said, so the art isn't good enough. You now have an art director in Spain. We designed a new main character for you, and here are the files. Enjoy. And that was weird. And I think I didn't quite rage at them at that meeting. I think I politely told them, I'll get back to you. And then we tried to figure out what just happened here. This was really, really weird. Where did this come from? I can see I have a small, I'm just going to switch my screen now. So I have a small audio issue with the slides here. There we are, sorry. So we had a game which was, to be fair, quite
Simon, I think you stopped the presentation now.
I stopped it. Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
I just disconnected the thing there for a second. I'll bring it up.
Yeah.
But it's on the window base, so when I turned it off, it shut everything down. Cool.
Yeah.
Just a second here, sorry.
No worries.
I have to tab back and forth a bit, and then present now in a window, and that window. So, are we up now again?
Yeah, perfect.
Oh, sorry about that. I just saw a picture was out of order there. So yeah, they gave us lots of, quite direct and somewhat random feedback, because this is stuff we hadn't even started working on. And who's this guy in Spain? What's going on? And yeah, they were really worried we wouldn't be able to get from this product to something good, because admittedly, this product is quite ugly. This is mainly technical. We had lots of AI stuff going on. We had level designs in there, but visually it wasn't there. And we had quite recently hired, so we had a proper art team internally, so we could do cool art. But yeah, they were really, really worried about the art direction. I know in this situation, you end up in a weird spot as a manager here, because you get to sort of explain to your employees or your teammates that, okay, they really don't like this stuff, even though we haven't done it yet. So you sort of you bring the bad news, and then you have to fight with your publisher because they bring really weird, strange news, and they really want to decide something which we think they shouldn't be as involved in. And that's a tough thing to do, and it's a weird situation. So what we ended up doing was just take a step back and look at it and ask, okay, so what are they on about right now? Why are they doing this? Yes, the game is ugly. We're not doing it yet, and we have plans for it. So let's just look at what they sent us and try to figure out what are they getting at? What's the examples they are trying to set with it? And then politely, I think it was the most polite way of asking them to piss off, really. We told them, leave this to us. We get what it is. These are the ideas we have, and this is what we're going to do. So we rescheduled a bit, took a meeting a week later, told them to back off. This is what we're doing. And yeah, 2 months later, the game looked like this. And to be fair, the game would not have looked as good as this ended up with, because we prioritized the art even more in this case, because they really made it clear that this is an issue for us and this is important. And it's, in the end, it was one of the things that made the game successful, really successful, how good the art was compared to other games in that genre. So they had a point, and it was good feedback, even though it was delivered in the most unsophisticated way imaginable. But you can laugh at it afterwards, even though we were angry back then. It's one of those things that comes up. And another thing is just, which sort of threw another wrench in the works for us, is when we get close to release, we realize, okay, so this early access thing wasn't actually agreed, or the whole publishing company wasn't really behind this. They weren't really sure it's a good idea. So we were going for early access, even though not everyone were convinced early access was a good thing. So now we're in a weird spot where, okay, so you don't want early access, but we redesigned it to be early access. We can't release an early access thing and say it's finished. This is not going to work. So we ended up with a further extension, and we had a lot of dialogue back and forth on why this happened, how it came to be, and try to work that out. And one of the main issues was the producer we were working with, we had a really good relation, and we had good dialogue back and forth, and all the details were clear. And both the art direction and this thing was a classic case of, even though we agree, everything doesn't reach the top band or the next guy in line who actually makes the calls. So we ended up with a situation where we weren't sure we could actually trust or had a relation with our publisher. We knew what was going on, or the things we said in the meetings, is this actually going to happen in 2 weeks, or is it just you and me talking? So that was a big issue which we had to resolve. And another one, just an example of everyday stuff that happens, and this isn't unique to THQ or so. This is just stuff happens, miscommunication things exist. So, for instance, one Thursday I came to work and I was in the middle of a design, and then I get a mail about a new testing session starting. So we had a testing company, which the publishers like, because it's what they do. They help us test the game. We just focus on developing the thing, and they help us with the rest, really. So I get a mail about a new testing session starting. So I have 5 guys doing function testing, as it's called, and they're going to do that for about a week. And the issue with this is these guys weren't expected until more than a week later. So all of a sudden I have a guy sort of reporting in asking, so what do you need from us? Even though we aren't even prepared for them today. We were expecting you 1 week off. And I couldn't get a hold of the guy who booked this. So what do you do? I could rage. I could do. I mean, there's no point in talking to the lead guy who's just doing his job, who got a report to do this testing. He's just loyally reporting, asking what he should be doing. So what you have to do as a manager in this spot is just take a step back and try to fix it, which was, in this case, just talk to the guy and say, all right, there seems to be a miscommunication thing here. We weren't really prepared for you guys. So I'll need a moment to just wrap up and see what we were planning to do, and I'll get back to you in 30 minutes or something. Meanwhile, you can tell you guys to do this. They can just general function test for a while, and I'll get back to some of the specific things. Because when you have a test team like this, we usually almost always we have a backlog of things that are extra tricky for us to test. Like this is a specific issue we have trouble finding what it's coming from, or these are known errors. Could you try to reproduce them? You generally don't send in testers just to go about and do stuff, test things randomly. That's one way of doing it, but this wasn't the case here. So I had to just quickly scramble the team and see, okay, what do we actually need? Do we have a fresh list? Yes, we do. And then 1 hour later, we could get them started properly and do things. But it's a weird situation because you have a professional company on standby with 5 guys, and that's just money ticking, and you have to take care of it. So drop what you're doing, ask your colleagues what the status is, and then just get it fixed, really. Improvise the Bear Grylls meme there. That's what you do in that sort of situation. And this sort of nail in the coffin, the final one where we were sort of, we need a dartboard in the company with a THQ face on it. They decided to do a ridiculously stupid thing on the internet. I'm not going to get into what they did, but they wanted to hold an Ask Me Anything, a sort of forum thing on a really questionable forum. And this thing really blew up on the internet. This was a super stupid move. And they admitted to it afterwards as well. This was, probably one of the dumbest ideas we've had so far. And the way this gets back to us is it's a partnership. So we work with these publishers. So anything they do relates to us. So now we are getting questions. You guys hang out on 8chan. Is that what you do? And no, obviously, that's a backward area of internet. We don't hang there. And incidentally, we were supposed to announce our game the day this blew up. So there were some quick phone calls and some panic going, you are not releasing an announcement for our game as this is the headline on the internet. We don't want to be near this thing. Just cool it for now. And yeah, I think they quieted down for a week or something with news in general, really. But so yeah, it's a rough period for us in this during 2018. It's summer and the autumn we're not having a really fun relation with the publisher. Lots of stuff isn't working, and it's not all because of the publisher. We had our own issues with the young team, so it's difficult for us to do things as well. So I'm not bashing them exclusively. I'm sure we made weird things too and didn't deliver exactly what they wanted and so on. But yeah, late 2018, this is the way it's been recreated for me. Is they had an internal publisher meeting where the Mr. Bossman said, "Is the game good or is it good?" And the producer couldn't really say. It's sort of good. We think the game is good, but it's close to release and we can't really tell. And the word is simply, we're not releasing until it's good. And this comes back to us as, okay, we need to fix the issues we have now and we need to get the game good enough so we can release it. And we're not releasing it until it's good enough, which is nice to hear from a developer's perspective that they never ship crap stuff because I have seen that from other people. But it meant that we need to make a big change to how things are happening, and we need to make it like a reset. So producer number 3 joins the fight. So we got a new guy, and he replaced the previous one, where a new person came in, and this was a former developer, a very organized guy, very structured German kind of person. And I think his role was kind of the Mr. Fix-It, and he came in to, let's try something new with this team. Let's see if we can get a new relation in and a new way of working, really. And right away we thought, okay, we need a reset as a sort of between ourselves. So we just set up a meeting right away where we flew down to Austria or Vienna, and we just had a long meeting where we sat through and talked about the whole project from scratch to where we are and what we think is working, what isn't working, and then you said, moving forward, what do we do? How can we make this game good? It was a really fun meeting, and even though it was, I'm jokingly saying emergency meeting here, but it was sort of, we have to fix this game now. I'll still look back at this meeting as a fun thing, and we laughed a lot about some of the really stupid things that happened, some of the bad decisions, some of the issues we had, and just said, cool, that's just history now. Let's fix the game. Let's set up things the way we want it for the future, and just make it good, which is a good thing, interesting thing to hear as a developer. You just have to make it fun now, which isn't as easy as it sounds. So the main issues we had, it was a mid-late game experience was quite repetitive. It wasn't as fun as we wanted it to be, and we needed more player motivation. So two quite abstract things to solve when we are really late in the project. We were sort of ready to release, and we have to fix major things here. And this gets to this chart, which is something we like to point at and joke about. And it's just a chart really dumbing it down to the earlier do you do things and change things, the easier it is, and vice versa. So if you're really late in a project, changes take more time, and changes are much more difficult to do. And from where we were standing, we were almost going live with it, and now we had to redesign major parts of it, and that is a challenge. So what followed was a sort of half a year, almost a year of small incremental changes and small attempts to fix up the game. We added an antagonist to the game, some motivation, which was extra, and we tried to encourage the player to redesign the factory halfway through, and all sorts of things. And eventually we reached a stage where we agreed, yeah, it's good enough now. The game is actually finished, and it's time for marketing. And here comes the final plot twist, and that's THQ weren't really sure anymore they were the right partners to market the game. We had produced the game, we made it together, but can we actually get this on the market for you guys? And they hadn't done a whole lot of strategy games, and they weren't really sure. And incidentally, they had recently purchased or sort of acquired a subsidiary called Handy Games, and these are Germans, and they were more into mobile games. They're much broader now, and they do all sorts of games, but it's smaller scale titles, and it's more of an indie vibe to them, I would say, than THQ Nordic, which is more of a classic, traditional publisher in that sense. And yeah, they were, like I said, acquired. So we actually ended up being moved to them purely for marketing purposes. So it was this weird situation where our producer was actually still the guy over at THQ, but everyone else were at Handy Games. So that was a unique situation with everything this means. So we actually had a new management in a way. We had a new QA lead. We had a new marketing team with new relations and new people to get to know and figure out how they work. Like I mentioned previously, you have to adapt to the people you work with. Most of these guys were very, very traditionally German, so very, neat and tidy, go here, do a list, and not the most flexible types, except for the marketing team. They were jolly and crazy, which they should be. It was a new challenge, new relations, and release day comes, and we are looking at the countdown, and we don't really know what to expect at this point, because the project has gone on for such a long time that we're not really sure. We're sort of doubting ourselves at this point. Is this game actually good anymore? We can't tell because we've been working on it so long. The reviews seems to be okay from the testing sessions and so on. So we are at a loss if this is a good product anymore. We don't know. We just trust the relation here, and they say it's good enough. So sure. So the day comes, this time for the countdown, and we were prepared. On the left, we have a bottle of champagne. If things go well, on the right, we have, and I'm going to butcher the translation here, or the pronunciation, it's a Rakia Viljamovka, and that's some kind of alcohol of dubious origin. So that's the bottle if things go bad. So we were ready. And then, sort of behind the scenes peek here, where if you've ever been on Steam and there's a release, you notice there's this countdown below the purchase button or near it, which says there are 2 days to release, or 2 hours, or 5 minutes even. The interesting thing about that timer is it doesn't actually connect to anything. It's just a date that someone sets. And to actually release the game, you have to be in the back and actually push a button and say, release it. So it's really a manual push the button thing. So if no one does that, the game doesn't get released. So we had it set up for as a sort of company thing, a fun situation where we could all together pop one of these bottles, hopefully the left one, and confetti and everything. And this is really what happened. And this is where I have a video. And I think I need Ia now to share it, because we were struggling with a sound here before. So Ia, are you here?
Yes, I posted the link in the chat.
Yeah. So just go ahead and click that one and enjoy the show from our perspective during a release. I'll run the show and run it without sound as well. I have it. I'm just going to assume everyone saw it since I started it late, I think. So yeah, that's what it's like to release a game from our point of view. It's someone had forgotten to give us the actual rights to push that button, even though we could see it and assumed we could. So there was a moment of panic and a phone call to Germany to get it out, push the button, but it came out. And we were hoping for and sort of wishing if we can just get it up to like 7 out of 10 on the reviews, that would be good. That's what we're expecting. We were worried it would be lower, and we weren't really expecting a financial success at this point because the product was extended so many times. So we probably wouldn't make bank, so to speak. But the main thing for us was it's a new team, it's a new IP. Let's get the name out and let's make sure at least people enjoy it. I hope we can sign a new contract after this. And we didn't get 7. We got 9 out of 10 in general. So it was a really successful release. I think this actually speaks to a lot to the relationship we actually had and how, despite all the issues we had during the project, we wrapped it up together nicely in the end and made it work. So we are still working with this publisher, even though despite all this mess the way there, we still enjoy it. And now that we've been through that process, the relation is quite different, and it's just much more natural and good these days. And the game went well. We made progress since then, and we released a DLC, and the game was ported to consoles, and those seem to be selling well as well. So I mean, it was a successful project despite the interesting things going on in the back end, which no one ever saw. So yeah, that was really a quick speed through the whole project from a manager's perspective and the publisher relation thing. I could have gone on and talked for hours about what it was like to make it and how it's changed things internally and what we had to do as a team and how team management internally worked. But no, I had an hour, so maybe for another time. But I just want to wrap up with a few tips for any aspiring studio leads or people who would like to work with publishers. Just a few words of advice as I head out, so to speak. And the first one would be to realize it's a marathon, not a sprint. That's a sprint. I think there's an autocorrect there. It's a sprint. It's really, you have to have the goal far ahead in mind when you do this, and there will be change along the way. Developing games is an agile process, and especially when you have people externally who you can never convey everything to them. There will be back and forth, and there will be changes. So always have that in mind. You can't make something quick and it'll be good enough. It takes time. These things take time. As a manager, when stuff happens, stay cool, stay pragmatic. Getting angry doesn't help anyone. It's just take a break if you need to. Try to see things the way they are, and discuss with people. Be pragmatic. Don't be too stubborn when it comes to what you're doing. But at the same time, stay true to your vision. And this is something I enjoyed hearing from the publisher later on. Is they thought we were annoying the way we were stubborn, but I also appreciate how we stuck to our guns when it came to some of the design decisions. The way we knew the game best, so we weren't really changing stuff. Even though you really wanted a new character, we didn't want to, because that wouldn't have been our game, and the whole game would have collapsed if we started doing that sort of thing. Team motivation would have been gone as well. So yeah, stay true to your vision, even though you have to be pragmatic at times. And then finally, take a step back and see things from all perspectives. you can always comfort yourselves that when you think someone is being an absolute idiot, the other guy is probably thinking the same thing about you. So it goes both ways. And communications in this sort of industry is hard. We have a lot to convey to each other, and it's complex things, and it's a lot of emotion, and it's a creative industry, and that's a big difficult thing. I mean, the major issue for larger companies seems to be communicating where we're heading and how we do things. It's not so much perhaps technical as you might think, or coming up with the best design. It's actually getting the teams to work seems to be a big challenge, especially as a manager, naturally. So yeah, those were my almost a bit earlier than expected, but yeah, that was my presentation. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Simon. It was really interesting to hear your journey and your perspective. And we're gonna